Yeah.
Hi. So we were talking about Dasri Narayan Rao, and again, I have to say, Dasri Narayan Rao, he took very bold themes. He did work around interesting topics, but is he really a filmmaker who's aged well?
I don't necessarily think that, yeah, I mean, a lot of the, again, the melodrama that we associate with Dasan and Rao, and a lot of the bluntness with which with which some of the positions are put forth. Yeah, I don't know that his films have aged all that well. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of them I've watched like a long time ago.
yeah,
But it's one of those things where like he's still an important filmmaker in terms of
yeah,
where the film industry is kind of shaped up. And he was one of the few voices in the film industry against the hegemony of like you know, everything coming under like essentially four big names running the entire industry, or five big names running the entire
yeah,
industry, or the responsibility of these people towards workers in the industry and things like that, as far as I
yeah,
remember. So yeah, I mean, it's just that sense of the lack of understanding of history, a lack of interest in it. But I
yeah,
wouldn't blame people for it. I would just, attribute that to the lack of institutions, the lack of media institutions, a lack of um, things and it's because, you watch a film, everyone's tendency when they watch a film that they really like is to like read about the film.
yeah,
That's how, people who've gotten into film criticism or even filmmaking have gone about. Like you watch a film. This is what happened to me and Roger Ebert and
yeah,
Bharadwaj Rangan and all of us, because I grew up. I would watch a Mani Ratnam film. I would really like it. I would look for writing online, and then there would be a Bharadwaj Rangan article, and
yeah,
then I bought the book and I read it. And it's the same thing with reading Hitchcock Truffaut after
yeah,
watching Hitchcock. And these things inform you about where, who are the important filmmakers, what are other filmmakers I can seek out if I like
yeah,
a certain filmmaker. What is being for a film critic, for a film writer, or even for a filmmaker, what can be done and what has been done with the medium of film.
yeah,
And what are the many innovations that what is the possibility of, what you can do with this medium. And I think that's shrinking very fast to
yeah,
this sense of this mass cinema, and we've come to normalize so much of it. Like even the grammar of mass cinema right now is just slow motion shots of like your hero walking around and hitting
yeah,
people, and
yeah,
it's shrunken so much from the grammar of what mass cinema used to be in the early 2000s. At least you would
yeah.
see sumos flying around. uh and now
Only Vinayak.
it's just guys. Yeah. You would see some explosions, you would see some
Yeah,
nice, clouds of smoke.
yeah.
You would see some like thigh slapping, and we don't even have that now. It's yeah. So the possibilities of the
Thigh
space
slapping is
has
not there. I
shrunk.
mean, Veer
No, I
Simha
haven't seen it
Reddy.
in a while. I haven't
Balaya
seen it in
must
a
be
while.
doing it. Balaya must be doing it. So,
Back
you
then,
say,
everybody used to do it,
right, yeah. And
So,
I mean, one thing is also, right, you spoke about ahistoricity and how the media doesn't help. But another thing I blame is the people working in the film industry themselves. For example,
mm,
I remember I was watching this interview of Chiranjeevi with Rajiv Masando someone, and he was talking. Chiranjeevi was asked, "Who are the most influential filmmakers in your career? Who you worked with? Who were really
mm,
important?" And he spoke about Bapu, Bharati Raja, K. Vishwanath, and
mm,
Balachandar,
mm,
and occasionally he speaks about K. Raghavendra Rao. But you never really hear him talk about Kodandaram Reddy, who is
mm,
like the guy who made like 25 films with him, and like his most iconic films of that time, of sorts,
mm,
like Challenge, Khaidi, and or
mm.
Pasiwari Pranam, and all, and that director you never see him mention around, and you don't know if it's some personal dynamic going on or what, but he was a pretty influential director, and he's also a much better commercial director than Raghavendra Rao, who is held up to be the standard of mainstream filmmaking in Telugu today.
mm. I
So
think, yeah, Kodandaram Reddy. It's the Kodandaram Reddy Chiranjeevi films. Really, those films. Kaidi, obviously, Challenge is another
yeah.
one. So
I
many of
really like
them.
this movie called Gunda. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen
Where
it, but like
the
yeah,
reason
it's been
why
a
I
long
was
time.
like blown away with it is there are two fight sequences. One fight sequence, he makes the hero and villain tie a blindfold to each other. and they have to fight while they're
Hmm.
blind. And the
Hmm.
climax has Chiranjeevi go under a train. Like it's clearly,
Hmm. I
he's
think I've seen that.
clearly gone under a train. He's tying himself under a train, and he jumps on the
Hmm.
train, and he like does also insane stunts in that movie. And you watch it like, fuck, this is why like he blew away that competition. I mean, you see
Hmm.
NTR and then you see Chiranjeevi, like the difference
Hmm.
is very clear. And also you had this thing that he used to rip off a lot of Hollywood movies. Like I think he's
Hmm.
ripped off Zorro, Tarzan, even Heidi was
Hmm.
Rambo, and like
First Blood, I think. Yeah.
yeah, First Blood. But they were and
Hmm.
even Escape to New York, which was Kiratakuru,
Hmm.
and they used to
Hmm.
Indianize it pretty well. So why do you
Yeah.
think we're not able to rip off Hollywood that well anymore?
I mean, we have. I think the grammar of Zack Snyder has seeped in to every mass filmmaker.
Right.
Um, the the slow motion, the speed up slow motion thing that he does. I
Hmm.
think we are operating in that grammar, and I think that is one of the sort of cornerstones of what our mass film grammar looks like at the moment.
Hmm.
You watch Prashant Neel, there is so much of Zack Snyder in him. There's also a lot of Christopher Nolan in
Yeah.
Prashant. Of course, I know Prashant Neel is not a Telugu filmmaker, but I'm talking about this. He's probably more influential in the Telugu cinema than in any other industry.
He said
Um,
Chiranjeevi is his favorite actor.
yeah, I mean that
And
also
he's
has to do with the
actually
fact that
Telugu by origin. Like he's not a Teluguite
yeah,
per
yeah,
birth, but he's Telugu by
yeah,
origin.
that I know.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, but it's that thing. I mean, Rajamouli also you can see some Zack Snyder
Yeah.
in what he's doing. Um, to me, like I've always thought of Rajamouli for me personally as a more effective Zack Snyder than Zack Snyder because I don't find Zack Snyder's films
Yeah.
are as engaging as other people find them. But um, I think we are able to do it. I think the constraint, I think the problem is one that we have to. We are not able to kind of come up with a grammar that is unique to us in a sense. In like I was thinking of Vamsi, right? No, not Krishna Vamsi. I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
not
know.
Krishna Vamsi, but the Pedda Vamsi, right? The
Yeah.
um
I like how they call him
and
Pedda.
yeah, people call him Pedda Vamsi. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what he should. That's whatever. But Vamsi's grammar, the way that he makes films, obviously he was like a protege of Bharati Raja,
Yeah.
but it's so unique,
Yeah.
and we don't have Telugu filmmakers who have a unique, stylistic signature, who have a lot of the filmmakers now are just trying to do Rajamouli or trying to do something else.
Hmm.
Um,
Maybe Vivek Adria?
this sure Vivek Atreya, yes, I would say Vivek Atreya for sure.
No, he's
Maybe
a writer, more of
Hassan
a
Goli.
writer than a director in terms of like
I
style.
think no, I mean Ante Sundaraniki has some really good directorial flourishes.
Yeah.
I really I think there is some really good filmmaking going on there. Maybe
Right.
maybe Tarun Bhaskar, maybe there's a few, but I don't even so. I think that there is a sense that the possibilities of what can be done with cinema are really shrunken. And I
Hmm.
think that's somewhat true worldwide. I think also with Hollywood, you're seeing the franchise cinema just like eating up the space for middle cinema and all of that. But you used to have this sense that the grammar of a film was malleable,
Yeah.
I'm almost like right now we're almost at that like there's a reversion to that kind of monotonous thing which you had in the 40s and everything where we would just film stage plays,
Yeah.
you know and now we're just it's the same. It's either of a masala film is like you used to have comedy tracks interspersed with fights
Yeah.
and like songs and things like that, and that was formulaic, but now we've reached a point where even the fights are formulaic.
Yeah.
um I think that yeah, it's just I think the sense of lack of history, lack of like even Telugu filmmakers don't know what the good Telugu films are,
Yeah.
um, or what the interesting Telugu films are. If a film is a flop, except for one or two, we don't even. There might be there are some really good films that just that were flops, but like have stayed in cultural memory in other film industries because of the writing about them.
Yeah.
Um, that hasn't happened in Telugu.
Yeah.
Somebody might remember a film that came out that didn't work, but was a good movie, but it's not been written about, or the writing about it has not become popular, or there is I know there's a lot of Telugu language writing that was prominent about films, and there were writers who were writing about Telugu films in Telugu. But I think right now there's just a massive sense of like a void of history and cultural memory.
Right.
Um,
And if you were to talk about one film that flopped and that should be remembered, what would that be for you?
that's yeah, you've got me there because like
Because you need to go with a very
it's
specific
difficult.
example. Like,
I don't know. I wasn't actually going for a very specific example because there's a few films that have flopped, which um and there's a few older films that I really don't know how they've done
for
financially.
example,
I don't know if um I don't know. Kshanaksham I hear wasn't
yeah,
didn't do well financially.
it didn't do that well. It was an okay-ish film, even I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
why
yeah, like that.
Shanakshanam didn't work in other languages. That still baffles me. Like, I get Telugu it didn't work maybe because we didn't have an A-center audience enough, but that it didn't work in Tamil or like other languages and all is pretty shocking to me.
Mm. I think it's yeah, but because Kshanaksham really shares its DNA with you watch the 2010s Tamil films, right? The ones that came out like post
Yeah,
Jigatanda and all of
yeah, Crime
these sort
Capers.
of meta-aware films. Yeah, the crime
Yeah,
capers and Kshanaksham is essentially doing that, but like, you know, 15, 25 years before.
and much better.
It has the same and much better, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree with that because it's yeah, Kshanaksham I mean, I know that's one that has actually stayed in cultural memory and
yeah,
people, but maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's spoken about enough. I think
yeah,
a lot of people consider like Shiva and Shanakshana old movies, and for me, that's baffling. Like,
yeah,
especially if you've grown up watching films from the 50s, it's like, you um, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But
yeah,
there's obviously this films. I mean, everybody now likes to talk about like, Khaleja or Neno Karne or one of those films.
yeah,
And I hold the slightly, I think, differing opinion that I can kind of understand why those films flopped.
yeah.
Um, because both those films are hedging against their own
Star
sense
image.
of experimentation and
Yeah,
they're sort of adding filler because they're scared that if they go the
yeah,
route that they want to go in, that the audience won't accept it,
yeah.
and that ends up dragging both films down.
Yeah. I
Um,
remember when Khareja had first come out, the common criticism was that the comedy parts are very fun, the comedy parts are too entertaining, but suddenly they tell he's
mm,
God, and everyone's like, what the hell is going on? That was the
mm,
original
yeah,
reaction. If you remember Kaleja when it first came out,
yeah,
people were like, the comedy portion is fun. Even then, people enjoyed the comedy portions. But once
mm,
the reveal comes that he's a messiah of that village, it was so
mm,
last minute back then, people felt that it didn't work at all for them. And I think maybe because people kept watching it on TV over and over again, maybe
mm,
that's why people became more accepting of that abrupt last minute thing that he is a form of divinity who's come to save that village and all that. Because that's
mm.
what I remember was the criticism with Kaleja.
I think with Khalija, it's interesting because yeah, first of all, I think some of the comedy stuff does drag it down a little bit, and I
Yeah.
think that the film doesn't quite know what to do with it after that reveal.
Hmm.
And this whole idea that somebody pointed this out to me on Twitter, that this whole idea that he's the messiah of that village and for that purpose, and he doesn't his powers don't really work in other contexts, is something that the film doesn't say. It's something that Trivikram has said
After the release
off
happened, yeah.
screen,
Yeah.
and that actually makes the film much more interesting.
Yeah.
Had there been something in the film where his powers are not working in other contexts, that I think there were some really interesting things that they could do, but the grammar of what a star vehicle should be and what a mass film should be sort of weighs and constrains that film, I think, and also the fact that there is almost a first draftness about it,
Hmm.
um, where you have this really interesting idea and you have a direction in which you want to take it in, but you don't double down on that direction and
Yeah.
you don't refine it in that direction. And yeah, I think the same with One in Okadani as well, where you have a really interesting psychological thriller that's just weighed down by this large portion
Yeah.
in the first half, where people tend to tune out.
I mean, even in One
Or
in Ukkarne, I remember the Golden Rice thing was very like abrupt again. Like, what's going on here
mm,
now? Like
yeah,
a lot of them because it's not built in throughout the movie. Like, there's no hint dropped about
yeah,
that. And all of a sudden, like, Golden Rice, what is going on? Why are we in London? I
mm,
remember that was also the thing with One in Ukkarne. But even
mm,
these movies that we talk about, right, that they're underrated and they shouldn't have flopped, they're all star movies. And because they're
Hmm.
star movies, the star fans also vociferously make the case as though these movies are completely flawless.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
when they're not. I mean, with the exception maybe Atadu, which even I remember Atadu also was not as big a hit as it should have been.
Hmm.
And today that's a bit of a shock. But again, I think maybe it's also because people maybe didn't get the family drama plus assassin thriller stuff, and because we watched it on TV, a lot of times we've gotten used to that genre shift.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
you think that it's interesting because you say the Messiah reveal about Khaleja? Because I think with Atadu also,
yeah,
the the turn to family village family drama is very, very sharp.
yes,
It starts off like a Hong Kong film. It starts off like a John Woo film,
yeah,
and then you're here, and then there's this whole thing playing out. But I think, yeah, that's a turn that people have probably gotten used to on TV.
yeah,
Whereas when you watch it in the theater, you're like, wait, this is started somewhere else, this is going somewhere else.
uh,
Like, where is this going?
uh,
I think
uh,
the anticipation that people have for stay in the theater is very different from how films play out on TV in cultural memory. I remember Nani actually saying in some interview about like why he doesn't do remakes, and he was like, when he did the Band Baja Bharat remake, and he
yeah,
said, well, Band Baja Bharat opened, and then there's word of mouth, and then people had time to process it over many weeks. And when you make a remake, your first day is competing with the final
yeah. Memory of
perception
that
that people
movie.
have of that, the memory of that movie.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think it's interesting how these films play out and how so many films that were critically reviled have now been like called the masterpieces of the filmmakers who made them, because the audience is just now caught on to what the filmmaker was trying to do. It's
yeah,
been detached from the immediate perception of what was on release.
yeah.
That's also happened with Tenet actually recently with with Nolan. Like I hated Tenet the first time I watched it. The second time I
I
watched it,
still haven't.
and then
I saw it the first time. I could not take it, and I have not seen it again. Like
yeah,
it's just too
that's
much.
exactly what happened to me. Um, I watched it the first time. I watched it the second time. I was just like, I don't get this. This is ridiculous. And then after a few years, I watched it a few months ago, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I get what he's trying to do. It's not perfect. It's not his best film, but yeah,
Right,
but it's one of those things where time can do its thing
right.
to a perception of a film.
Hmm. And speaking of star films that became flops and that people consider cult classic today, I think the worst example, controversial again, but then I think a bit of a controversial person in my opinion, is Aapad Bandhavadu. I think that movie is way overrated just
Yeah.
because they saw Chiranjeevi do it at the commercial peak of his career, but it is not a patch on even challenge in terms of just the filmmaking and the storyline. It's very abrupt, it's very cut short. Even and compared to that, Shubha Sankalpam is even worse. I genuinely don't know what they were trying to do in Shubha Sankalpam. Like I
I
saw the
completely concur with you on Apad Bandhudu, because that's another film that I have never taken to.
yeah,
I also have the controversial opinion that Sagar Sangamam, also another Vishwanath film, has a very steep fall off in the second half.
right.
I
With
don't consider it.
with him marrying off Jayaprada to her original husband.
Yes, and I think the film goes downhill after
But
that. Um,
I can people say that he did that because he believes in the institution of marriage and all that. I have a slightly different thing. I feel like he did that
mm,
because he realized he can't really provide for her the way he can. Because
mm,
I remember in the movie, the husband comes and he's saying, I'm gonna go set up my business now. My financial problems are clear. And actually, at that
mm,
moment, that Kamal gives a certain like realization look. And I always felt like this guy is
mm,
someone who simply feels like he can't, take care of this woman who's been so generous to
mm,
him. He can't like sustain her with
mm,
his earning or something, and that's why he marries her off. Which is why I was able to
mm,
digest that movie much better. But yeah, Swati Mutyam even at that time was a much bigger hit, just so you know.
mm, Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Because it's a
But
lot more simpler, a more humane story. It's something that you can relate to a
yeah,
lot
the emotions
easier.
are much more explicit in Swati Mutin
Yeah,
as well compared
yeah,
to Sagar Sangam. I don't dislike or hate the film, but I
yeah,
think that the reputation of it is a bit, you know, yeah, I think with Apad Bandhudu, I do concur with you. I think there's a sense that some people try to band it around as like a respectable Chiranjeevi film as opposed to
yeah,
the mass films that he did, but so many of the mass films that he did are so much better than
yeah,
you and I completely agree with you. I think Challenge is my favorite Chiranjeevi film.
yeah. Same.
Um,
I was shocked at
it's
how
it's
good it was.
just
It is
yeah,
extreme. even Silk Smita's character, usually she's supposed to be this sex siren who's there to be seduced and
mm.
all, but she gets a very respectable character in that movie. Like she
Yeah,
leaves her husband and she gets a job of her own and all.
yeah, and the relationship between the Chiranjeevi character and Suhasini's character,
Yeah,
and the way that the awkwardness of that friendship kind of transitioning into or having other connotations and all of that is handled by both of them, and the sensitivity with which that whole relationship is, that's it's yeah. I can't think of a film I like of Chiranjeevi's more than Challenge.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and it comes back to the Kodandram Reddy thing, but yeah.
yeah,
Um, those are the real Chiranjeevi films, right? Like those are
yeah,
that's the when you talk about Rajnikant, you talk about Talapati and Mullam Malaram, and this
yeah,
is with Chiranjeevi, you talk about the 80s films.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
And do you think, I've often had this grouse, a lot of fans of Chiranjeevi also have this grouse, that
Mm,
Chiranjeevi, given the peak that he was in 92, right, like after Gharana
mm,
Moguru and like all those blockbusters, he never
mm,
really took risks and he never really focused on trying something that was different, unlike Rajnikant,
mm,
and which is why he got stuck to his own market when he could have been a pan-South superstar himself.
mm.
And you
I
can see
think
that,
that sorry, I interrupted you.
no, I was just saying that you can see the averseness to taking risks, even in his later movies, even the entertaining ones, they're all very template based. Like, Indra,
Mm,
Tagore, Shankar, he's great in them, but there's nothing really groundbreaking about them in a sense. They're all solid,
mm,
okay star vehicles. And that, because
mm,
that sort of template thing doesn't fly today, that you're not supposed to make remakes anymore. It's a bad word now. He's
mm.
struggling because there's no easy cushion for him to fall on.
I think I mean, this has happened with every star. I think that this has also happened with, the big Hindi stars, the big Tamil stars, where, an exception like Kamal Hassan aside, um, you would say that at a certain they get into films because of a passion for cinema. They do a lot of films.
Mhm.
They try to balance their big mass spectacle films with interesting films that they try to do in that format. And what tends to happen is that at a certain point, I think it becomes like running a business, and you start minimizing risks
Yeah,
because of the number of people that have accumulated around you. You have offices, you have employees that you have to provide for, you're responsible for, and there's like a lot of once it becomes a business, you can't. It's just like if you talk about companies and small companies and big companies, small companies can obviously take a lot more risks, and they tend to be a lot more experimental with things. And the larger you grow, you become an institution, and then as an institution, you're responsible for. And then there's the whole fan culture thing, where your
yeah,
fans will say, you shouldn't have done this kind of thing. We don't accept this kind of thing from you. You have a certain image that you don't want to break, which means that you can't do certain kind of characters easily. Um, Obviously, in Tamil cinema, I think the range which is open to a Rajnikant and so on is a little bit more flexible, especially over the past few years. I think Rajnikant has um, sort of widened the kind of
yeah,
character that he plays in his films. But in Telugu, I think it's also a lack of imagination from the writers, and I think
yeah,
the appetite for risk is very low, especially
yeah,
the more successful you
yeah.
are.
I mean, the irony of
You
this
could.
is the least talented actor of the big stars has the most iconic film, Nagarjuna.
Hmm, hmm,
Because if you,
uh,
I mean, and in terms of the big stars, if you take range,
hmm.
Nagarjuna is not exactly a very versatile actor per se.
Hmm.
But he does have,
Versatility, yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I think it's because Nagarjuna, I've always had the sense that Nagarjuna is somebody who loves cinema,
yeah,
like really loves cinema. Like, there's that whole story of how he
who's
got
Maniratnam?
Mani Ratnam to do Geetanjali with him. Yeah,
Yeah,
morning walks in Chennai and
yeah,
all of that, morning jogs in Chennai. I think that, um, yeah, with Nagarjuna, I've always had the sense that he does. Yeah, he's done the mass films and all of that, but I think that there is a genuine pleasure involved in the films that he's taking pleasure in doing. You know,
yeah,
um, you can see very clearly when he's hamming it for a performance like even Annamaya. You can kind of see that uh, he's not. it's not one of his best performances. I know, as successful as that film was.
He won a
Um,
national award for it.
I know, but I, I, I I doubt that somebody can watch it today and say that that's one of his best performances. But you look at something like Manmaduru and you know that he's having a lot of fun with that, you know.
Maybe it comes closer to his
Um,
real self.
who knows? But yeah, it's that the appetite for risk tends to be really low, and a lot of the stars are just preserving their relationship, their stature with fans, and the idea of themselves as a business and an institution.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that the narrative has also become about, oh, the stars are going to see, the fans are going to see their stars, and then what else do you need from a film?
Yeah.
It's just a platform to stage the star.
Nagamansi's
So
controversial statement recently.
mm,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
You know,
so
uh-huh.
it's pageantry. I mean, it's the idea of it's like you go to a temple to worship, and now you go to the cinema hall to worship your star.
Uh-huh.
And then it discounts the fact that the successful films are successful because a lot of different kinds of audiences go.
Yeah.
And if somebody is a fan of a star, it doesn't mean that this person can be taken for a ride as well. They may be part of a family, they may
Yeah.
be they may be students, they may be somebody else, and they are just not going to watch a film if it's not good enough at the end of the day.
Yeah.
um, and I think a lot of the assumptions that these people are making about what mass films are and what mass films can be are also coming from like an ego, a sort of bubble of um, you know
There was anything
people who are
we
like
throw
yes
them.
man. Yeah, they'll watch anything we throw them, and just like a bunch of people saying, echoing the same opinions that this is what a
Yeah.
mass film should be like. This is what a mass film should be like. Ah, the hero has to have an entry. The hero has to do this. The hero can't do this. The heroine. This is how the heroine should be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're getting the same. Like when a film flops, they just do a different combination of the same thing.
Yeah.
I think when Vikram happened, there was a real reckoning in the Telugu film industry as well, saying that, oh, how have they managed to do this? Like, we should be doing this with our stars as well, like
Multi-starring.
crafting a new kind of narrative and a new kind of.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of Vikram, but I really
Yeah.
saw people trying to rethink what is possible with a big Telugu star.
Yeah.
But I also think, at some stage, yeah, these stars are aging. You know,
Yeah.
it's not that you cannot expect this attempt to restage the star as he's just the same as he's in his mid 20s or his early 30s or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just that's going to have depreciating returns at some stage with everybody.
Yeah.
um, you've got to be imaginative to make a new kind of cinema, a new kind of mainstream cinema, a new kind of parallel cinema, middle cinema. Just this conversation for Telugu cinema has become tiring about like all these comebacks and like can they replicate what they did in the early 2000s or mid
Yeah.
2000s or mid 90s, and it's just like maybe they can't, and maybe they don't want to. Like, can we make films with other people? Like, you
Yeah.
know, it's it's not that these people are not successful and whatever.
Yeah.
It's about the cinema at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, you
So
speak about stars and all, but I think the biggest star, in a sense of just having a sheer crazy fan base, is also the most
mm,
ironic star of them all, and that's Pavan Kalyan. Because you look at
mm,
the movies that made Pavan Kalyan, they're all
mm,
rom-coms, they're all movies about this boy next door sort of thing. I mean, I think there was a huge missed opportunity that no one remade Kabhi Haan Kabhi Na with Pavan Kalyan in like the late 90s or something. Because he played
yeah,
that sort of,
that's a great idea.
yeah,
Mm,
loser, I mean, too late now, 30 years late. But
mm,
like, yeah, like he played these very relatable college kids. I mean, Khushi is a rom-com that's just about a couple having a silly fight at the end of it all.
yeah,
And like this
yeah,
guy has this insane, crazy mass fan base. It's a bit hard for me to digest because I was not born in that era.
mm,
And at this point, every teacher I had in my high school was a Pawan Kalyan fan. And like he used to
mm,
have that hairstyle and like he used to have that traveling soldier as their ringtone and all. So since you grew up
mm,
in that 90s era, and I think with Pawan Kalyan especially, you need to be in that era to get why he was so special. Can you tell me why he was so
mm.
special?
With Pawan Kalyan, I think he's like very relatable, um, in a certain sense to a lot of people who are young, like young men.
Hmm.
Um, both from what he has spoken about himself and his own life off screen and the kind of things that he was doing on screen. There is that sense of, there is that lyric in song from Tammudu, "E Kalam Hero Ajanabahudu Avanakarledu" or something, which is
Yeah,
the sense of this thing that we should have like a tall, fair-skinned, whatever hero, that's come from NTR to a certain
yeah,
degree. Um, that you can be somebody who's a bit shaggy, who's a bit like, like the it's in some sense what the Beatles Mop Top did with and maybe to a much lesser degree in terms of the stylistic impact, but that sense that you can be a shaggy young boy
hmm,
and you can fall in love with women and like you can be that, but you can still be a hero.
hmm,
You can be lanky, you can be like, you can have your arms floating
yeah,
around a little bit. You don't have to be like the whatever. And that idea of being freewheeling, that idea of being shaggy, that idea of being somebody who's outside the conventions of what a mainstream hero is supposed to look like or embody. And yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing for Shah Rukh as well.
yeah.
I think
But
you hit the
but
nail on the
with
head there. Kabhi Ha
but
Kabhi Na, Shah Rukh is going
but
for
with
that
Shah
as well.
Rukh, he's a very talented actor. Like he's got
Hmm.
range. So it's a bit easier to understand. With Pawan Kalyan, range is not exactly the word you would associate with him.
I mean,
I don't think
the
he's ever
range
played a
is.
character per se.
I think there's a lot of our stars who have not. There's it's since the beginning of our film industries. I think that it's I think it's the versatility in my mind, and I'm not making this as an argument for some actors or other actors, but in my mind, versatility is a bit overrated.
Okay.
Um, and I know, like, you take John Wayne for instance.
Yeah, he always
John
tells me
Wayne
that.
plays John Wayne in every film,
Yeah,
but his performance is great as John Wayne.
yeah,
When he's
yeah,
hurt, when he's angry, you're like, he's extraordinarily compelling as the John Wayne character.
yeah,
You will have a Kamal Hassan, and then we tend to compare everybody with Kamal Hassan
yeah,
and all of that. But Rajnikant does Rajnikant and Talapati, but Rajnikant does a really compelling version of Rajnikant and Talapati.
yeah.
You know, um, maybe every actor is not the best person to play every character under the sun.
Hmm,
I'm not saying this as a way of saying that, okay, Pawan Kalyan is a better actor than so and so, or somebody else is a better actor than them. But I just think that personally, I find that metric a bit, I'm a bit like, what if I really like the way somebody has done two, three characters over the way somebody else has done 50 characters?
hmm.
There's something extraordinarily compelling about the way that they've done that. Like,
Right.
it's just one of those things. Okay, so I'm also running out of time. So like I can
Nice.
give you 5 more minutes.
Yeah, okay. I
But
mean,
not
it's
much longer.
ending now. So, I
Sure.
also, let me just, I'm thinking of how to conclude this. Hmm. So now, looking at the future of Telugu, right? I think one very illustrative example is really Vaijayanti movies under Nagashwin.
Hmm.
Because Vaijayanti was a big production house in the past, but it was only under
Hmm.
Nagashwin they've taken a really different turn. Like they're making quality movies these days. And they're also trying at the same time to appeal to Pan India. Like they have the most diverse casts I've seen. Do you think the
Hmm.
Vaijayanti model today is going to be the future of Telugu for say the next 5, 6, 10 years? And like movies like Kalki in that sense?
It's interesting. I mean, Swapna, then what like Nagashwan's films obviously are a huge part of what's happening in Vaijayanti. I think it's interesting, right? The film there is an aesthetic that you think of now when you think of
Yeah,
Vaijayanti. You think of there's a certain kind of obviously there is the scale in which these films are mounted,
yeah.
but there is also a certain nostalgic quality to them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think Sitaramam was sort of like the flagship in that sense. Um, and I think Mahanati is Vajanti too, right? Yeah, Mahanati
Yeah,
is obviously Vajanti. And Mahanati and Sitaramam both had that quality
yeah,
um, of this construction of this sort of Telugu this nostalgia for a certain era of Telugu and the way that they speak in Telugu and the way that the letter writing like uh, part in Sitaramam. Um, I think it's yeah, I really like what they're doing. It's interesting because even Kalki did a lot of things for me, which a lot of the big blockbusters, the big post-Bahubali pan-India films are afraid to do.
Yeah,
It doubled down on world building. It went into it did some things with the main characters and with mythology and things which were interesting. I
yeah,
don't think it's a perfect film by any means.
yeah,
I don't know. I'd like to see how it pans out. I think a lot of it, again, it comes back to the writing of the films. It comes back
yeah,
to how much are they going to say these things work for Sitaramam, Mahanati, and Kalki, so we are going to replicate these things, and how open they are to how imaginative they are, and like how many new other things that they have that they want to try.
yeah,
Because the moment they say ABC have succeeded and we'll do that and we'll do that and we'll do that, that's how we get everything we do today. Now everything is a bad iteration of Bahubali or a bad iteration of Pokari or a bad iteration of something else, some
right,
factionist film from the 2000s.
yeah,
And it's that thing of like how many new things are you comfortable trying?
yeah,
How big is your appetite for risk? And I
yeah,
saw that Kalki they were significantly risky things that they tried to do in Kalki, and I think they pulled them off. I
yeah,
know it's not for everybody that film, but I tend to like it. So
yeah.
yeah.
I think I've cracked the plot of part two. I'll just tell that on some other day.